You wake in the Kremlin, March 1584. The air doesn't move. It clings, thick, wet. It tastes like copper and rot, like something died in the walls and no one dared remove it. Your lungs reject it. Your throat tightens. This is not the smell of sickness. This is the smell of a body betraying itself from the inside out. You hear nothing. No footsteps, no whispers. The servants move like shadows, their eyes trained on the floor, their breath held behind clenched teeth. They know. They've always known. In this palace, silence is survival. The Tsar's chambers reek like a dying animal. Sweat, pus, the sour stench of flesh turned against itself. You feel it before you see it. The weight of a man disintegrating while still alive. The walls seem to lean inward, as if the palace itself is holding its breath, waiting for the final collapse. This is not just a death. This is a reckoning. But to understand how a man becomes a corpse while still breathing, we must first understand what he did to his own soul. The stench has a name. It has a face. It has a date. November 1581. 3 years before this death, Ivan the Terrible killed his son. Not in battle, not by poison, with his hands, with rage, with an iron-tipped staff that cracked bone and split skull like overripe fruit. One argument, one strike, one throne, shattered. The blood pooled faster than anyone could move. His son, his heir, his future, his only thread to eternity, collapsed into his arms, eyes wide, mouth slack, life draining in thick red rivers across marble floors. Ivan screamed, not the roar of a czar, the wail of an animal realizing what it has done. They say he crawled to his son's chambers every night after, on his knees, clawing at the door, howling, begging forgiveness from a corpse that could no longer hear him. The empire he built with blood rendered hollow in a single moment of fury. The man who demanded absolute control lost the only thing that mattered: his bloodline, his legacy, his reason. And from that fracture, something else began to crawl out, something that no longer resembled a man. The ghosts don't need to be supernatural. They are memory. They are consequence. They are the thousands of faces Ivan erased, and they never stopped watching. The Oprichniki, his black-robed death squad, riders cloaked in shadow carrying severed dog heads on their saddles as a symbol, sniff out betrayal, devour the disloyal. They swept through towns like plague, burned villages until the sky turned gray, dragged families into squares and made examples of flesh. And Ivan watched. Sometimes he participated. They say he laughed during the tortures, that he personally attended executions, nodding approval as bodies were impaled, flayed, drowned beneath frozen rivers. The screams became routine, the blood a kind of liturgy. But by 1584, the laughter had curdled into something else. He saw their faces now, in the corners of his chambers, in the flicker of candlelight, the orphaned children, the mothers who begged, the men who died swearing loyalty even as the blade fell. He had spent 30 years building a throne of skulls. Now he had to sit on it, alone. And his body, his flesh, his bones, began to mirror what his soul had become, rot from the inside out. The body keeps score, and Ivan's was collecting debts written in blood. His flesh began to split, not from blades, but from itself. Sores opened along his arms, his back, his legs, weeping pus that stank of vinegar and death. They would not close. They would not heal. Servants wrapped him in linen soaked in oils, but beneath the cloth the rot continued. His hair fell in clumps, gray, brittle, like dead grass pulled from poisoned soil. His spine curved inward, collapsing under the weight of a frame that no longer trusted itself. Bones pressed against skin, so thin you could see them. White ridges beneath translucent parchment, as if his skeleton was trying to escape. They had to carry him, lift him like a child. And when they touched him, sometimes the skin tore, just tore, as if his body had given up the pretense of holding together. This was not illness. This was something else. The violence he had inflicted outward, the burnings, the impalements, the screaming masses, had turned inward, cell by cell, bone by bone. His body was devouring itself, the way he had devoured his empire. And in his desperation, he turned to the only thing left, God. He crawled to the icons, not metaphorically, on his knees, spine bent, forehead pressed to stone until it bled. He wept, howled prayers into empty chapels, begged a God he wasn't sure was listening anymore. Ivan tried to repent. He compiled lists, thousands of names, the burned, the tortured, the executed, the disappeared. He sent them to monasteries with gold, with land, with desperate pleas. Pray for them, pray for me. As if prayer could be purchased, as if forgiveness was a transaction. He prostrated himself for hours, days. His servants found him collapsed before altars, lips cracked, eyes swollen, whispering the same words over and over, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." But he knew, somewhere beneath the performance of piety, beneath the ritual and the gold and the blood on his forehead, he knew, you can't buy back a soul after you've sold it in pieces. The names kept coming. The faces wouldn't stop. And God, if he was there at all, remained silent. And if God had turned away, maybe something else would answer. When God falls silent, men turn to darker voices. Ivan summoned them from the edges of his empire, sorcerers, astrologers, witches dragged from Siberian forests and Karelian swamps. They arrived cloaked, hooded, stinking of herbs and something older than incense, something that made the priests turn away. He met them in secret chambers, rooms without icons, without crosses, places where the air felt heavy, wrong. They read prophecies in bone fragments and ash, drew symbols in blood on stone floors, whispered incantations in languages that predated Christ. But this wasn't about power, not anymore. He wanted escape from the guilt that clawed at his throat, from the rotting prison of his body, from the date he felt circling him like a vulture. He wanted them to tell him that he could be saved, that there was still time, that death could be delayed, bargained with, cheated. They told him what he paid them to say. They lied with conviction, and he believed because belief was all he had left. A dying tyrant, surrounded by charlatans, all of them performing a ritual they knew was pointless. Magic is the last refuge of men who've run out of prayers. And the prophecy came, March 18th, 1584, the day you will die. One astrologer dared to name the date, March 18th, 1584. Ivan had him arrested, chained, threatened to burn him alive if he was wrong. You'll watch your own prophecy fail, and then you'll burn for lying to a tsar. But the astrologer didn't flinch. He just stared, waiting. Ivan mocked it, raged against it, called it superstition, peasant nonsense, the ravings of a charlatan desperate for attention. But at night, alone, he counted the days.
March 10th, still alive. March 15th, weaker, but breathing. March 17th, his hands shook as he gripped the edge of his bed. The palace didn't sleep. Servants moved through halls like mourners at a wake. Nobles whispered behind closed doors. Everyone waited. March 18th, morning. Ivan opened his eyes. Sunlight crept through the curtains. His chest rose, fell, rose again. He laughed, a wet, rattling sound. The astrologer was wrong. He was still here, still alive. He had beaten fate itself. He called for a bath, for wine, and then, March 18th, late afternoon.
Ivan felt lighter, almost giddy. The prophecy had failed. Death had blinked first. He called for a chess game, something he hadn't done in months. His attendants exchanged glances but obeyed. He sat at the board, fingers trembling slightly as he arranged the pieces. Pawns. Knights. Bishops. He smiled, made a joke no one dared laugh at. For a moment he looked almost human again, almost innocent, a child arranging toys. But the king wouldn't stand. He placed it. It fell. He tried again. It toppled. Again. His fingers fumbled, clumsy, disobedient. The piece rolled across the board as if it refused to be placed, as if it knew something he didn't. His hand froze mid-air. His face changed. Confusion flickered across his eyes. Then fear. Real fear. The kind that recognizes the end before the mind can name it. He opened his mouth to speak. Nothing came out. His body tilted slowly, like a tree that had finally decided to fall. His hand knocked the board. Pieces scattered, black and white spinning across marble, clattering into silence. The king piece rolled, stopped. The room exploded into chaos. Ivan didn't slip away quietly. He thrashed. His body seized, violent, animalistic, spine arching off the floor like something was trying to rip out of him. His legs kicked, arms flailed. Servants rushed in, tried to hold him down, but he was stronger than he should have been, stronger than a dying man had any right to be. His eyes rolled back. White. Empty. Foam bubbled at the corners of his mouth, pink with blood from a bitten tongue. The sounds, God, the sounds, choking, gurgling, a wet, rasping wheeze as his lungs fought for air they couldn't hold. His body slammed against the floor, again, each convulsion harder than the last. The stench hit immediately, bowels releasing, bladder emptying. The tsar reduced to meat and fluid and reflex. A tyrant's death is never dignified. It's always grotesque. Always. The man who executed thousands with precision, who controlled life and death with a nod, had no control over his own end. He was just a body now, failing, breaking, voiding itself on cold marble. And then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence. His chest didn't move. He's not dead. Not yet. But he's not alive either. Ivan lies still. His chest moves, barely. A shallow rise, a shallow fall, so faint you have to watch closely to see it. His eyes are open, staring at nothing. Through the ceiling, through the sky, into some void only he can see. The servants stand frozen. No one knows what to do. Should they call for priests, for physicians? Should they mourn? Should they run? Do you celebrate the death of a monster, or do you fear what comes after? No one moves. No one speaks. The room is suspended in a terrible, breathless silence. Even the air seems afraid to circulate. The candles flicker but make no sound. In that moment, the entire empire holds its breath with him. He's there, and he's not, hovering in that thin, terrible space between existence and erasure, between man and memory. What does a man see in his final moments? Does he see his son's face, the villages burning, God turning away? Or does he see nothing at all? What does a dying tyrant see? Maybe his son's face, blood pooling, eyes still open, still trusting even as the light left them. Maybe the flames of Novgorod, an entire city turned to ash while he watched from horseback, satisfied. Maybe the monks he tortured for sport, their screams echoing in monastery halls that were supposed to hold only prayer. His wives, 7 of them, some dead, some discarded, some who stopped being women and became obstacles he removed. The images bleed together, fragmented, distorted, a river of faces flowing past too fast to name but too familiar to forget. Children orphaned, men impaled, women widowed. Thousands, tens of thousands, all of them pressing in, crowding the space behind his eyes. Maybe redemption looks like remembering. Maybe damnation looks the same. There's no wisdom here, no final clarity, no moment where the soul opens and light pours in. Just confusion, terror, the suffocating weight of everything he did and everything he can never undo. Did he finally understand what he'd become? Or did he die still believing he was right, that the cruelty was necessary, that God would forgive a czar, that history would call him great? The body goes still. The question remains. Ivan IV dies at approximately 6 p.m., March 18th, 1584. The astrologer was right. They make the announcement. Bells toll across Moscow. The official rituals begin. Prayers, preparations, the machinery of state death grinding into motion. Priests arrive. Nobles gather. The body must be dressed, anointed, made presentable for a czar's funeral. But there's a problem. The body won't cooperate. The flesh is too far gone. It continues to rot even now, even in death, as if decay has become the only process his cells remember. The embalmers work quickly, desperately, but the stench is overwhelming. The skin splits under their hands. Fluids leak through the linen wrappings. Some bodies are so poisoned by life that death can't dignify them. They do what they can, wrap him tight, seal him in incense and oils and lies, present him as a holy man, a Christian czar, a father of the nation. But everyone in that room knows what he was. The monster is dead. And outside, across the empire he built on bones and fear, no one mourns. The funeral is grand, gold, incense, icons glittering in candlelight, priests in silk robes chanting prayers that echo off cathedral ceilings. The procession stretches through Moscow. Nobles, clergy, foreign dignitaries, all dressed in black, all bowing their heads in practiced sorrow. But no one cries. You don't mourn a nightmare. You just exhale when it's over. They go through the motions, cross themselves, recite the proper words, maintain the proper faces. Because even dead, Ivan demands performance. Even as a corpse, he commands fear. The incense burns, thick, myrrh and frankincense layered heavy enough to choke on. It's meant to honor him, but really it's meant to cover the smell, the rot that even death couldn't stop. In distant villages behind closed doors, there are quiet celebrations, bread shared, wine poured, whispered thanks to a God who finally listened. Official history will call him Ivan the Great, Ivan the Terrible, a complicated man, a harsh but necessary ruler, a czar who secured the empire. But the people who survived him know the truth. He was a butcher, and now, finally, the butcher is dead. But what did he leave behind? Ivan left behind more than a corpse. He left a blueprint. A brutalized nation, a nobility so decimated it would take generations to rebuild. A people who had learned that survival meant silence, that loyalty meant looking away, that power was something you endured, never questioned. But the deeper legacy wasn't political. It was moral. He taught power that it could devour its own people and call it patriotism, that cruelty could be dressed as necessity, that the state could demand absolute loyalty while offering nothing but terror in return, that a leader could kill thousands and still be called great as long as he expanded the borders, as long as he kept the throne. Cruelty became tradition. Violence became policy. One man's madness became a nation's inheritance, passed down like a curse no one knew how to break. This isn't just history. This is warning. This is the echo that never stops. Because monsters just don't die. They teach. And somewhere, someone is always listening. Fyodor survived. Ivan's other son, the one he didn't kill. But survival isn't the same as living.
Fyodor is broken, gentle, pious to the point of uselessness, simple-minded, some whisper, brain-damaged, others claim, maybe from witnessing too much, maybe from being born into a bloodline already poisoned by violence. He becomes czar because there's no one else, but he doesn't rule. He prays. He rings bells in church towers like a child playing a game. Nobles govern in his name while he wanders palace halls, confused by the weight of a crown he never wanted. He has no children. The doctors blame his wife, but maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe violence this extreme just burns out bloodlines. Maybe trauma written into DNA refuses to continue. Ivan didn't just kill his heir. He killed his bloodline's future. The Rurik dynasty, 700 years of Russian rulers, ends with Fyodor. Not with glory, not with battle, with a gentle, broken man who couldn't father a child and didn't know how to be a king. This is the final cost. The last body counted. Violence doesn't end when the perpetrator dies. It lives on in the survivors who carry it. So what do we do with this knowledge? Why are we here? Why are we watching this, 440 years later, sitting in safety, staring at the wreckage of a man we never met? Not because we admire him, not because tyranny is entertaining, because we need to understand how humans become monsters. We study Ivan not to glorify him, but to recognize him, to see the patterns, the red flags, the moment when power stops serving people and starts devouring them, the point where control becomes cruelty, where strength becomes sadism, where a leader stops being human and becomes something else entirely. This is uncomfortable knowledge. It doesn't feel good to sit with. It doesn't offer easy answers or satisfying closure. But it's necessary. Because the shapes tyranny takes change, but the structure stays the same. The justifications evolve, but the violence repeats. New faces, new nations, same hunger for absolute power, same willingness to destroy anyone who questions it. We tell this story because history doesn't just record monsters, it warns us about them. And if we look closely enough, if we're honest enough, we might see the warning signs before the body count starts, before the rot sets in, before another Ivan rises. We started with the smell of rot. We end with its lesson. Cruelty always rots from the inside. Ivan's physical decay, the sores, the splitting flesh, the stench of a body eating itself, wasn't random. It was manifestation, the external finally matching the internal. His body was only showing what his soul had become decades earlier. Every act of violence is a small death. Commit enough, and you're already a corpse. You just don't know it yet. This isn't metaphor. This is pattern. This is what happens when humans trade humanity for power. When they justify torture as order. When they call cruelty strength. When they convince themselves that the blood on their hands is noble, necessary, patriotic. The rot always comes. Maybe not immediately, maybe not visibly, but it comes. The body keeps score. The soul keeps receipts. And eventually the gap between what you project and what you are collapses. Ivan thought he was building an empire. He was building a graveyard. He thought he was securing his legacy. He was destroying it. He thought he was powerful. He was already decaying. The lesson isn't complicated. You cannot commit atrocity and remain whole. You cannot brutalize others without brutalizing yourself. The rot always comes. The Kremlin still stands. The walls Ivan walked, the chambers where he rotted, the floors where he collapsed, choking on his own breath, surrounded by chess pieces he could no longer control. It's still there, in Moscow. Tourists walk through it now. Students take photos. Guides recite dates and facts in measured tones. Life continues. History becomes architecture. Blood becomes tourism. The stones remember nothing. But we have to. Because this isn't just past. It's present. The structures built by cruelty still house power. The thrones constructed from bones still seat leaders. The patterns Ivan established still repeat. Different languages, different borders, same logic. Somewhere, right now, another man is reaching for a crown, justifying violence as necessity, calling cruelty strength, demanding loyalty he hasn't earned, destroying anyone who questions him. And he's convincing himself he's different, that his violence is righteous, that his cause is just, that history will vindicate him, that the rot won't come. Ivan thought the same thing. Ivan the Terrible died on March 18, 1584, choking on a chessboard floor, surrounded by chess pieces he could no longer control. But somewhere, right now, another man is playing the same game. He's not different.
He's not.